Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Human SOS Show. We are on episode number 103 and looking forward to a great day. Or should I say, episode 104, if I could read our own banner. And we're going to address a topic that was suggested last time around. And so, Anton, you want to open things up for us?
Good morning, everybody. Hope you're having a great day, evening, whatever it is in your part of the world. As always, let us know where you're joining from. Love to see and give you shout outs. Kevin will give you a shout out for being part of our audience. And today we're going to talk about, can self-love and selflessness coexist? Is there selfishness in there with self-love? Just kind of the mix of those things. And I can't remember who was it. May have been a T for somebody else that asked for that last week. And we love when audience asks us topics. Me and Kevin try to sit here and think about what should we talk about each week, but it's much better to know what you want us to talk about each week. So if there's a topic that comes up to you, please let us know today and we will cover it next week. So starting out, it's something that I think is more of an older concept where people in the past didn't necessarily consider self-love as something that was an important thing. And I think that some of the younger generation has brought it forward and has shown that self-love and selflessness can coexist. But it's all about our favorite word on the show, and that's balance, right? It's if you over-index on self-love, well, then you don't have time nor headspace in order to be selfless. Everything's going to be from an internal lens of how does this benefit me? How does this take care of me? And you're not going to be able to look at others. Versus if you over index on selflessness and you constantly give and give and give and give without providing self love, and ultimately that's a form of it is self care. That's the famous term of you can't pour from an empty cup, where you're not going to be able to give as much. And I talk a lot about this with, my biggest example in my mind has always been mothers. Mothers are constantly giving away everything they have, all their free time, and it's very hard to convince them to take care of themselves, to love themselves more. And I just look at it I use this kind of analogy, and I go, okay, look, you have 100% capacity right now, and your capacity is big. Then you keep giving away 100%, and that capacity shrinks. So over a course of a couple of years, over a course of a decade, whatever it may be, you end up having a 50% capacity compared to what you used to have. So you're only capable, even if you're still giving 100%, you're only able to give 50% of what you were able to give that a decade ago. And instead, what you should be doing is finding balance, right? There's not a right amount, but me and Kevin will always talk about 10%, right? Keep 10% of yourself for yourself, keep 10% of your time to give yourself self love. And that way you preserve that 100% capacity. You're only keeping 10% for yourself. And at any given point, you're capable of giving 90% of that capacity for, however long you're around this earth. And that's the key. And that's, if you're a logical person like I am, that helps me to really think about and go, you know what? Yes, I need to go and nurture myself. Yes, I need to, exercise my body, but also exercise my mind. Give myself that self-care in a form of self-love and saying, I am worthy. I deserve this. I can have nice things. I can have nice job. I can lead people and feel like, I'm prepared to do that.
Yeah, let me give some shout outs here. Hello, Mary and Rick and Atif, Marius and Kamal and and Mario, Zaid. Glad to have, and Sharon. Glad to have all of you guys with us this morning. Appreciate you being here. Always appreciate your presence because that means a lot to Anton and I to have you here. and and so yeah, we really appreciate it. Look forward to your comments and questions. By the way, yeah, from my generation, Anton, we weren't selfish, but we didn't have self care. The order of the day, most of the time, if anything, was self-sacrifice. And again, there are moments where that's part of the picture. But if all we do is sacrifice, 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 we end up in a point where we have nothing to give. Um, and as Zaid comments, and you said earlier, the cup overflows from what's in it. And it's funny because the first time I ever heard or was aware on a bigger scale about the idea of having to take care of self was actually a pastor in a sermon. He was talking about keeping our batteries recharged. You've got to have, if you have it all going out, you have nothing left at some point. And so the concept has been around a while, but we've not taken the time to focus in on it and say, okay, this is important. And what for me, I like the term self love as much, maybe even more than self care, because it's actually based in a principle, and it's the greatest commandment. And because we're told to love God with all our heart, and the other part is to love our neighbor as ourselves. And we focus in on love our neighbor, which is important, but there is a two-part component to that: love our neighbors as ourselves. And that as ourself part is not there by accident. God doesn't stumble into things. That's very purposeful. And in order to truly be able to love others, we have to have a component of loving ourselves. And that's something that gets missed, but it's a principle that's been around a long time. So I'm glad we're beginning to bring it forward and um, and to be able to address it and think about it and maybe make cultural shift. And
I think you
Rick
can pull up.
has,
Yeah, there you go. Pull up Rick's
yeah.
comment. Just that very.
How does self love come into play with faith? Um, and I'll try not to go. See, this is an area I go nerdy on. Anton gets nerdy on health and things, and this is my area. Um, uh, how does it come into faith? Self love is about not. It's not about loving ourselves to the point that, or in the manner that we think we're something special, better than everyone else. Self love is recognizing the fact that we are created and we have an intelligent design, and that we are created with a purpose and a baseline concept that's so key is that we're all created with equal amazing value. So I don't have to prove that I'm better than someone else, or they don't have to prove that they are better than me. It's not about being better than each other. It's about accepting who we have been created to be. That's where self love. That's the foundation of self love, and and then from a faith standpoint, the other thing is that I talked about this about living for weekends and how that's not wise, because we're designed to live each day fully and abundantly, and the one exception we're given is a day of rest. And so part of our design is to have that restorative time, and that's when what we're talking about self-care. So self love is at the heart of our faith, and has been the whole time. We just haven't always understood or recognized it or even accepted it. And so it has to be a part of it in order for us to be able to love other people. And, that's why it's not antithetical to being selfless. It's actually a necessary component to be selfless. So, your thoughts on that question, Anton?
Marius got a comment right after it. Balance is key. More God made the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh, right? Um, and the other thing that comes to mind for me is denying self love is denying God's love.
Mm,
God loves us more than anything in the world. He created us in his own image, and forgetting that fact and thinking I'm not worthy, I am, beating yourself up verbally, mentally, whatever it would be, deprecating language, that's saying that God is wrong. And that's very, very kind of cold way of looking at it, but he's not. He's never wrong. And we need to remember that. And we need to remember that God doesn't love us for our things. God doesn't love us for our cars, our houses, our education, our job, whatever, all those things. God loves us, for our existence, and just for being his children. And we need to remember that. And we are enough simply because of that, nothing else.
yeah, I pound on this one all the time. I think the reason we have conflict a lot of times among us is that we are still uncertain of that value, and we're not confident in that value. So we react in such a way that we feel like we've got to defend our value to other people. And in worst case situations, we defend our value by tearing down their value. And that's where we really create problems for ourselves. So let me see if I can get ahead of our comments this morning rather than catching up the whole time. Zaid makes a comment. I've heard that Marines tell their cadets that at the moment you think you're done, you still have 65% more to go. Anton, I know you've got a view of that one.
Um, I mean, it's true. I don't know. Percentage can vary. It depends on
Right.
which drill instructor you're talking to, or whatever the officer in charge. But that's the truth. I mean, our minds sometimes are weaker than our bodies, and we give in mentally where the body can adapt and overcome and keep going. But at the same time, that is done through nurturement, right? If we're
Mm,
nurturing our mind and we're reminding ourselves that, I'm not a quitter, I am going to persevere, I'm going to overcome. Adapt and overcome is a very, very common military term. I wouldn't say it's
yeah.
just military for Marines, it's in general all military. And that comes from a portionally self-love, saying I can adapt and overcome. I am strong, I am powerful, and this physical challenge that's in front of me right now is not going to bring me down. If I don't have self-love, if I don't have that confidence, right? We talked last week a little bit about ego, and we can mix that in here. If I don't have a little bit of that ego inside me going, you know what, I can overcome this, you're not going to. Like, you have to remember that that's inside you. You can do it. And like, my take on ego is it's not all bad. Ego under control that is channeled in the right direction can be a very powerful tool for good.
Definitely. And I know my son's a Marine, uh, former Marine, and he's talked about out of boot camp. The big thing that they were told is I can't is not an option. That, like Anton said, we're much more capable than we think, or we think we are. And the problem is that we've been limited in our perception with our narratives and things that we've gone unaddressed. And once you start addressing them, there is going to be a sense of confidence. A confidence not just in ourselves per se, but in who we've been created to be. And that's how we avoid becoming uh, egotistical or overbearing ego. Well, let's see. ATIF. Self love is giving yourself some importance and nourishing your body and soul in equal measures as we strive to give our significant others whereas narcissism, malignant narcissism, is tarnishing others and using them as instruments for our own designs. Narcissists consider themselves an ocean, whereas all of us are droplets and integral part of the ocean. The Z generation is totally self absorbed. They're more glued to their smart screens than to breathing living beings. Um, yes, I like that analogy of we're not an ocean. We are a single small drop in a massive ocean, and that helps keep our perspective in order. Your thoughts on that one, Andon?
Just the word narcissism, I think it's an outcome of over indexing either on too much self-love or too much or not enough self-love, right? If somebody grew up and they didn't get no love, they didn't get love from their family, from their society, from things like that. Sometimes the switch flips that they, have to always find it from inside, but it's too much and they're always overly centered. And sometimes, people that have gotten too much of it get used to it and they think that that's the norm, right? So even narcissists, like I've had this conversation with a friend recently, and I said, I want you to look at a narcissist like you look at a sick person. Just somebody dying in the hospital from cancer. Like it's just pity them, look at them and pity them, and look at it from a lens of them being ill, and understand that sometimes they can't control what they're doing. They can't control. They don't know any different. They don't know any better. And coming from that place of empathy, no matter how hard it is, trust me, there's some narcissists that create a lot of pain in the world. There's a lot of narcissists I know at Tiefin. You've talked about this many times in the workplace that you have to deal with, that create a lot of problems at work and push a lot of people down on their way up. But it's better no matter what, to look at them from the place of empathy and try to understand, where is this narcissism coming from? Because usually it's some sort of a deficiency somewhere. There people will say, oh, narcissists have a huge big ego. No, that ego is not fed. So it has to constantly be fed from somewhere else. It usually comes from poor childhoods, or, their parents pushed them way too much to succeed and never gave them love of actual kind that mattered, unless they actually accomplished something. So that's just my advice, is when you do deal with a narcissist, come from a place of empathy, no matter how hard it is.
Yeah, a narcissist is someone that's not, they've mentally and emotionally been short circuited. It's not that they are sitting around thinking how they're going to get the world around themselves. It's just a short circuit in their system, and they don't know what to do, and at moments are not even aware. And I would even suggest sometimes they think that they are doing something good in the process because they're short circuited. Okay, Marius comments, the more you help others, the more you help yourself, but we must rest as well. It's part of that cycle. Yes, we give, and we are made very clear that we're to give of ourselves. But that doesn't mean that we give of ourselves until we have nothing more to give. And so that balance has to be found in there. And in fact, it has to both be there in order to function. And if we have only one of those and go to that extreme either way, it's not healthy. It's not where we need to be. And so, yeah, we've got to keep that balance up. And then Anario is asking about what we're going through with everything going on, and talking about the term endemic. And the question he poses is, what can we do to improve our attitudes during the adverse situations we're facing in the world? Anton, you have thoughts on that one?
Well, it comes back to our attitudes are not going to change if we don't address our own issues.
Mm.
It's something that me and Kev talk about on the show a lot. What stress does to our mind, what stress does to how we respond and how we look at things. And, stress makes us want to blame something. Stress makes us want to go after something. It doesn't want to make us sit there and understand things to a level that they really are. We just react, right? We quickly assess the situation. We react. We want to blame a country. We want to blame a certain group of people. But the reality, this ties right back into self-love. If we don't do enough self-love, whether it be self-care, whether it be just nurturing our mind, we're going to be very reactive. And that can be endemics, that can be, you name it, that can be racism, that can be just hatred in general of somebody that's different than us. Because if we don't do enough self-love, then that comparison game starts to happen all the time. And instead of elevating ourselves, we try to bring other people down because we
Mm,
feel we're so exhausted mentally and physically that we can't elevate. And the only way we're going to feel better is if we push somebody else down, and somebody that's an easy target oftentimes.
mm. Yeah, it's and what we're talking about is a factor in being able to change our attitudes during these times. And I was thinking about that. Um, this what you were talking about, pulling people down and all that. Um, when we feel fed, when we feel appreciated, we feel recognized, we then take away that drive and that need to somehow be apart, to be in the same place others are. And so the key for self love is to allow ourselves to be fed. And whether that's through our time of spiritual nurturing or mental emotional nurturing coming from other people, or recognizing and accepting the value that we have. There's lots of different aspects to it. But the key, as Anton said, is we've got to start recognizing that there is an issue that we've got that hasn't been dealt with. And it varies by person. I know for a number of years, I really struggled with what we call self esteem. But the interesting thing in my situation is you would think self esteem would cause someone to be lowly and cower and not be forward and forceful, but that's only part of the possibilities. The other symptom is someone that has struggled with self-esteem is always being aggressive and assertive, trying to find their place. And the extreme of that is what we call narcissism. And and again, narcissism is more than just an issue that would average person would deal with. It's a short circuit that's occurred for some reason. But uh, be aware of what's going on with us. Be aware of what is reality and truth, and that's why we need to always be evaluating our narrative, self narratives, and also dealing with people that will help us with perspective. Because if we can get that perspective, then we're not grasping so hard to prove ourselves. And so those are the ways that I think of, and it comes back to the self care part. We want to think that being selfless and giving is the ultimate, not without the self care part. And that's where we go back to our favorite word, balance. And the key for me in all of this is faith, because through my faith, I get a better understanding of myself, who I am, and what I am meant to do and be. And a lot of people are not looking at that. We're kind of on autopilot with the operating under the winds of norms around us, and rather than being very proactive, if you will, or forward moving in who we're supposed to be, we're trying to be what others seem to think is the right thing to be.
It brings me back to the question: can self-love and selflessness coexist? And my mind always thinks in visuals, just how it works. And the answer to that, from my standpoint, is only temporarily.
Mm,
It can't; those two can't exist without each other. On a long term, because self-love is the battery to the actions of selflessness. If
mm.
if
Oh,
if we
did you
don't,
just come up with that, Anton? I
just
like
now
that.
on the fly, and
Wow, I'm impressed. You're
feel
on.
free to take it, folks. But it's right. Like, you need to, and just, I just want everybody to pause right now and logically try to quantify how much throughout the day do you exhibit self-love to yourself, right? Do you practice self-love to yourself? Because I think that we can all agree and say, yes, self-love is important. we're like, sure, it makes sense, but are we actually practicing? Are we actually committing that 10% of our day, of our time, of our focus onto self-love? And I don't mean just self-care. Like I said, that's just a component. It's just our language that we use internally. For me, I will raise my hand and I will say I personally struggle with this. I am
Mm.
good with the self-care piece. I've been a health coach all my life pretty much, and I feel like forever. And I am good in that part. But where I'm not good is self-deprecating thoughts. Is sitting there and saying how I'm not enough at this. Like, most people in my life know that I'm constantly chasing the next accomplishment. I'm constantly chasing the bigger thing, bigger achievement. Part of that to, I think it was Rick that made the point about Marine Corps. That's you feel like you're done. You're just beginning. You're just getting started. You can go bigger. You can go harder. Sure, but am I constantly draining my own battery that way and limiting the capacity of that battery to then I can't use it for selflessness. I can't use it as well for other things. So just ask yourself that, and don't run past that thought, past that question very quickly. Sit down and assess. And if the answer is like mine and you identify things that are draining that battery instead of recharging it, right? Change that. Go about it, make a plan, sit down, write a journal, and logically outline what you can do. And we talk about this all the time. Don't try to create this perfect plan. Oh, tomorrow I'm going to start, doing X, Y, and Z and all this stuff. Just do one thing consistently and build on that. Start to notice, if you're an emotional person, how you feel throughout the day, how much more likely you are to step in and do good in the world and be selfless and put yourself, in harm's way or whatever for other people's sake, whether it be physical harm, emotional harm, whatever it may be. Or if you're logical, start to observe and actually write down things that you're noticing that are different, that you're seeing that are different, right? The conversations you're having, the word choices you're having, the thoughts you're observing. And then because you notice that, you see, okay, I actually gave myself that time. I gave myself that space to create self-love, self-care, whatever it may be. And now I'm seeing these benefits. Sometimes we need to go down and really break it down to very specific things like that to say, this is so worth it. I can't believe I've been doing this all along and I need to do more of it. And like I said, whether it's in your head, whether it's physically, whether it's emotionally, spiritually, it doesn't matter. Go after it.
Definitely. And let's get couple of comments from Marius. The best way to deal with burnout is to do the best you can and know that God is in control. We talk about this all the time. What can you control? What can you influence? Get a plan and do what you can. If you can't control it and you can't influence it, you got to let go and trust God to handle it, the rest of it. It's just a very solid principle in how we avoid getting ourselves in stressful situations. And certainly a way to go about it is do what we can and let God do the rest. Let's see. Sharon says, I like everyone's comments, agree with them, but the one that resonates with me more is what Marius said. The more you help others, the more you help yourself. But he said, we must rest as well. I find myself helping others because I want to, and it makes me feel good, but I wind up not having time for myself or to rest. And Sharon, you're hitting on something that I'm concerned that there are a number of people fall into this category. There are people that do give. There's some of the most selfless people in the world. And what is very telling is when any of the rest of us try to reach out and do something for those people, they'll resist. They will push back because they want to be busy uh, helping, and that's great. The problem is, and I hope I'm not going to offend anybody, but I'll have to take my chances, is that at the end of the day, that is a form of pride. It's a form of selfishness. And that is that we don't need somebody else's help. It's not important. And when we do that, we are missing something in ourselves. Plus, we're robbing others. And part of this whole process that we're a part of, and as humans, is to be able to give and receive. The problem is there are people, a lot of people that are all about receiving too much, but there's also a number of people out there that only want to give, and you can't live sustainably in either situation. You've got to be willing to receive as well as give, and that's just such a key point. And there are some people that don't get that. So it's not all about ego. Is there's other or ego in the way that we think ego. I think there's a component of ego involved. It just looks different.
This one makes me think of a tough conversation, and I've had this conversation with numerous clients in my life. What place are we giving from?
Mm,
Is it a place of I am in a good place myself and I'm giving because that's the right thing to do because it does make me feel good, or I am in a dark place and I'm giving because that's the only thing that makes me feel good, right?
hmm
Like that's not a balance between self-love and selflessness. That's a over index on the other side.
hmm
And what makes me think about is like comedians, Robin Williams, that's who comes to mind.
mm,
Right? They give through laughter nonstop, but because they just have a whole lot of darkness on the inside, they're very unhappy, they're miserable, and the only thing they can find joy from in life is helping others feel better by laughing. So if we find ourselves chronically giving, constantly giving, and really just a ton of it, there's nothing wrong with it. But if it comes from a place of that's the only way I feel, it's kind of like, people that are overly stressed love to do high intensity exercise. They love
mm,
to just push their bodies to the limit. And it seems like, oh, that's really good for you. It's good for your health. But the reality is, it's the only way they can shut their overactive brain down is
mm,
by pushing themselves so far physically that their sympathetic nervous system shuts down. So once again, even though it's because we're doing a good thing, if it's coming from a bad place or not necessarily a bad intention, but for us a bad place, it's not that good of a thing.
yeah, it is definitely an unhealthy place to operate from, and ultimately we get a model from uh, from our Creator. What we where we give from is out of the abundance of give grace and goodness we've received from our Creator. And when we're operating from in that realm, what we give is more value. It is also in line with who we are. uh, for example, I use the whole thing about music and singing. you know it would be like me trying to learn all I can about singing and then teach other people how to sing, yet it's not coming from a place where I'm designed, because people that have ever hear me sing know I'm not gifted at singing. And so it's not aligned when we are giving out of what we don't have. It's not aligned with our design. And makes me think of Zaid's question here, which is one I know that we all struggle with, especially when we're working for other people. How much should we give to the employer in general, and when we don't have the good feedback, especially? Okay, I think the problem we see of finding how much we have to give to be a good employee is the problem, because we're most of us are working in a way and in an area that is not part of our design. And so it our work is a constant drain rather than being a recharge, because we're doing what we are designed to do. And so people that are trying to figure out how to be excellent in their work but not destroying themselves, my question is, could it be that you're not in the place that is aligned with who you are designed to be? I know that when I thought about teaching, that was going into teaching was more of a choice of out of necessity and a logical choice. But I was thinking, because I hated school when I was in school, that it was going to be a constant drain. What I discovered was that God was working in my life in a way to move me into that role, because He had prepared me to do that. That is part of who he designed me to be. And rather than it being a constant drain on me as a person, I found it actually recharging me because it was in alignment with who God had designed me. I could be tired from other circumstances, but be working hard teaching and have a young person have an aha moment, that moment of clarity that they get a concept, a principle. And boy, it's like I get an instant charge into my whole being. And it actually, rather than is tiring, it is actually gives me charge and energy. So if we're always concerned about, well, how much do I have to give at work to be a good person, good steward, being excellent, which is all good things, without burning out, there is a potential you're not in the right spot, because part of doing our work, if we're doing it in alignment with who we are, we many times are going to get charged out of it rather than discharged or depleted. Anton, what do you do? Thought, yeah. What is your thoughts about giving? How much to give at work?
Never more than you can, and never more than you should. And let me break that down. So think of how much you can give as X amount of units, right? Here I come logically again at this thing, and look at it like a pie chart. Pie chart has many, it should be broken down into many areas, right? And they're all different. I'm a parent, Kevin's a parent. So for us, we have to reserve a piece of that pie chart for our families. We have to reserve it for our partners. We have to reserve it for, we already talked about, for our self-care. But also there's more to us than just other people and, our bodies and our minds. There is our purpose, right? There is our education. There is our fun. And there's just many different things that you may sit here and say, these are the things that are really important to me. So as long as I'm feeding all those things with how much I'm giving to each one of them, not equally, depending on the person, depending on your priorities, then I can have what's left over for work. Now, that's more than I can. More than I should is assessing, if I give X amount of myself to this job, what is happening with that energy? What is happening with that thing that I give, my essence? Is it being used well? Is it being used to help others? Is it being used to accomplish the mission and purpose that I'm put on this, on this life to do? And if the answer is yes, okay, great. Keep giving that X amount that you've divvied out for that work. But if you're not getting feedback, you feel like your energy is wasted. You feel like you're not really putting forth any positive outcomes from what you're giving because of the state of the employer or your boss or whatever it may be. Then for now, make a paycheck, but take some of that other stuff and put it in other places. Maybe you take a portion of that pie and you split it in half and you say, you know what, I'm only going to give this half, but the other half I'm going to use for looking for the next job, for looking for how to accomplish my next purpose. Or maybe it's as simple as, I keep giving half. That's enough to keep this job, enough to keep getting me paid. But now I'm going to go and volunteer and do this for free and give, this half of this thing that I had reserved for work somewhere else that'll keep me fed from purpose standpoint. So there's not right or wrong answer, but just looking at it that way is no more than you can and no more than you should.
Well, and I have to add, Anton, we haven't mentioned this in a while. Anton and I aren't about giving formula type answers or the 5 easy steps and so on, because there is no one right answer for any one of us. You can pick some steps and answers that will affect a small percentage of people, and that's what people do today. They get those patterns and they say, oh, well, if you'll just do this, then you'll be successful, or whatever. And there's a percentage that it will hit. But at the end of the day, what we need to understand and what we strive to do is present you good, solid principles, and then help you with assessment to figure out where those principles are a challenge in your life. And that's what we're about, is what we do, is to be about helping each individual assess where they are, and then give them principles that they can apply depending on their situation, to grow out of what they're in, or better yet, grow into what they can be. And it's just a key piece that we have to really be mindful and thoughtful of. And we're not going to give you any, this is the formula to move forward. Um, by the way, Anton, you have been made quote of the day.
I saw it. I commented on Zaid's
That's,
post.
yeah, that's pretty impressive, especially as early as, see, Anton's even earlier than we are. And so he's does good to be completely awake in this time in the morning. So good job there, bro. uh, let's see. Ed Mario, as for the market for startup companies, other business sections, what is the impact of the market in the face of the war between Russia and Ukraine? I tell you what, Ed Mario, we will address that on another time so that we can kind of stay on topic, if that's all right. Richard, oh, welcome, Richard. Glad to have you with us. You do work for the sake of the work, not for the feedback, which should be offered with the design of keeping the charge of work. Okay, Anton, thoughts on that? Welcome, Jane, by the way.
It kind of comes back to that. This is directly ties into self-love and selflessness. Like, if you don't have enough self-love, you can't do work just for the sake of the work, because you're looking for that external validation. You're looking for that positive feedback. You're looking for somebody to come tap you on the shoulder and say you're doing a good job. But if you are filled with self-love, like as I mentioned, the battery's charged up, then doing work for the sake of the work will be much easier, because then you don't need that external validation. You see the impact that it's making in the world or around your customer, around the team that you're on, versus having somebody actually publicly recognize it or privately recognize it, whatever it may be.
Yeah, doing what we do because it's what we're designed to do takes on a very different effect in our lives and even in our health as we go along. Jane has a comment, or what a great question. I believe you must have self love in order to be selfless. If you don't love yourself, who else should? In giving selflessly, you're showing that you love yourself enough to give of yourself. Jesus comes to mind and how he loved himself and gave selflessly. Well, you won't get any argument out of me about him, Jesus, being the example of how to go about this thing called life. And indeed, he was very much understood and even recognized that he's God's son. And so he wasn't lacking in recognizing who he was and loving and accepting that. But no one out there gave any more sacrificially than he did. So definitely great example. Anton, thoughts there?
Selfless selfishness. It's something that I've talked about a long time ago, and it's just a concept that I believe in. I believe that we have to be selflessly selfish. It just means that I come from a place of selflessness, but in order to do it, I have to be a little bit selfish. I'm not necessarily tying this into Jesus, because Jesus had no selfishness in him, but just in general, I think it helps people to have better self-love if you're thinking about it as you're not doing something bad, you're not doing something wrong, you're doing this to equip yourself to be better selflessly for other people. And if you need to focus on it that way, give yourself that foundation and say, I need to do this because of this. But when it comes down to, Jesus, like, I mean, what a thing it is to know you're the son of God. Like, I mean, that's gotta be so cool. I mean, I will never understand it or experience it, but you take on the world, you take on anything you want, because you never question your self-worth for 1 second. But and even with that, I think that even Jesus still faced it. I mean, when he had his trials in the desert, and there was moments that he even considered. Imagine that. Imagine knowing you're the son of God and still having to face what we face on a regular basis. And we don't give ourselves a break, and we go, oh, how beating ourselves up. How can I think that? How can I be that way? And it's like, just remember that the most perfect human to ever exist still faced those things. and still had to deal with them. So give yourself a break. Understand that sometimes you're going to doubt. Sometimes you're going to have imposter syndrome. Sometimes you're going to have all these things that we actually see in the Bible that Jesus experienced. We're just going to have them probably more often and in different ways. But he persevered, and so can we.
I'm looking, by the way, Zaid, thanks for being here. You're always a great part of our show, and I understand sometimes we have to take off. Thanks for that. And the question, and I'm having trouble, Anton identified as LinkedIn user. Can you see who that is? I don't want to.
Let me see.
I'm not seeing it on my screen. So it's either Sharon or Kamal, I believe, are the two today that are identified LinkedIn user. My apologies.
Yeah, it's Kamal. It's Kamal.
Kamal. Okay. So his question is, so coming back to basics, how do we find what we are designed to do? That is a great question. And it takes time. It takes searching, very intentional. And it's a growth process. What I suggest is that if you are genuinely after getting that answer, the question answered, the key is to begin to ask the question. And there are different ways. We talk about some of the different tools that help us. One, and this is, again, not meaning to be offensive, but a lot of what we're about and how we're made is in the Bible. Read it. Whether you agree with the tenets of faith there or whatever, read the Bible about people and how we're created. And then also seek out mentors, wise friends, coaches, whatever, to also do that. And then the one concept that I've been about for a long while now is to disconnect. You've got to get away from the stuff distracting you from knowing who and what you are, and then sit and observe. And that doesn't mean you've got to stop somewhere and sit down and do nothing for days or weeks, or it's more about a mindset, but looking at who you are, what you do. Another insight into that is family. Whether we like it or not, we are a product of our family. So look at your family. You'll get insight into who you are that way. And sometimes that's a tough one because that can become emotionally charged and a lot of things. But all of that is ways to come back. And the way I've expressed it for a while is that we have design, we have passion, we have purpose. First thing is we want to begin to understand our design, and understanding both a shared design that we have with everybody, and then our unique designs. And that's a journey. And but you've got to start on it to ever get to that point. And for those of us that are believe in faith and walk in faith, it involves prayer. It involves asking God, who are we? Who am I? What am I about? What have you designed me for? And so I wish I could give you a formula there, Kamal. And the question is a great question. And it's one that I think a lot of us need to really ask ourselves and approach finding answers. And because if we don't, we're going to miss an awful lot. And I think that is where we're at today. We as a culture do not take time to really delve into and ask the question, who are we? And the more we can do this and use the different principles, the better it is. And in fact, I'll give you a tool if you want to research another. Again, it's just a tool among many, but there is a device used by therapist counselors called a genogram. And going and finding out about your family, the history of your family, not just when they lived and died and those things, but emotional and mental history of your family. And you will begin to get real insights into who you are, because we're all a product of where we come from a birth standpoint. But if you're really struggling with that, Kamal, I would be happy to get on a call with you and we can do some exploratory. Another tool, I always forget our own resources, Anton, our assessment. It's a stress assessment, but that assessment gives us insight into a lot of things about ourselves. And so, if you want to go to our website, perspectiveforce.com, and take that stress assessment, you will find it to give you insight into your design. They're all parts and pieces and ways to go about it. Anton, you got any other thoughts on how to approach that?
I love how you said to disconnect. I think that we have to disconnect, but at the same time, disconnect from external and connect to internal,
Yeah.
right? If you're so busy externally, if you're running 100 miles per hour and not slowing down to know yourself, right, the design, passion, and purpose will not come clear to you.
Mm.
If you don't slow down to pray and really spend time ruminating on what it is, and it's not an easy thing. It's not something you're going to sit down today and be like, okay, this is what it is. It's a consecutive thought process that one thing leads to another. You unpack it, you think through it, but these things are the foundation. These things are the foundation of what it is you're designed to do. Knowing yourself, understanding your passion, understanding your skill sets, understanding the world around you from internally. How can I help? Where can I create purpose? Right? And if we don't slow down to do that, everything we build will be weak. Everything we build will not face the storms that are going to come. They're going to try to take you away from your purpose. They're going to take you from ability to accomplish that purpose. So build a solid foundation by knowing yourself and investing in yourself before you start to, try to make this thing happen, whatever it is you're after.
And another good way is reading books, especially about people throughout history that have demonstrated character and good qualities. And I put the name of a book in that is, you probably have to search a bit for it, but it is a very impactful book called His Image, My Image by Josh McDowell. And if you want one that really gets to the core of the questions, it's a good one. Really is. I found it very helpful. Okay. Richard makes the comment that uh, that makes him more accessible. I believe you're referring to our relationship with our Creator, and I think that's highly important. However, we go about it, we need to understand that we need that relationship as part of being healthy as a human being. Um, Richard also says we can sometimes find out who we are by asking others who they believe they are. Yeah, self reflection or reflection with others can make a big difference. And it's all part of that disconnect and observe. We definitely got to connect inwardly and observe, but also observe outwardly. So often we're operating uh, in autopilot. And so we're not even aware so often of what we're doing. And when we stop and look at what we're doing when we're operating in autopilot, it's a reflection of who we are, because in those moments, we are most likely doing what we are most basically either designed to or being influenced to do. And that's the other key that we have to really consider is, are we operating in design, or are we operating in what has influenced us from around us? And that's another principle, is that renewing our mind. A part of what we need to be doing on a daily basis is renewing our mind. Change, questioning the narratives is another way to put that. Would you say that's a fair way to put it, Anton? That it's a part of questioning the narratives that we have allowed to become part of us, and the way we do that is through finding truth and understanding more about who we are and going through that journey.
There's something that I always used to say, and it just makes me think that it's not perfectly accurate. But I used to say all the answers you need are already within you. And that comes with a caveat that you have experienced enough with the world and you've understood other people to, to Richard's point, that you can look at all of these different building blocks, and then you can build within yourself what you want to build within yourself. If you lived in a dark box all your life, you don't know enough to have some of the answers necessary. You have to have enough experiences and understanding of others to be able to really look inside. But at the same time, none of it can be answered by somebody else. None of it can be given to you by somebody else. It has to always come from within, with that foundation of understanding others in the world.
Definitely. And finding those places through growth is such a key. And by the way, that's part of our design, is to grow and deal with those things, including adversity. We as a culture spend so much time avoiding and resisting adversity, not understanding that by doing so, we are shortchanging ourselves. We are not learning about who we are and who we can be and should be, because we're avoiding the very means by which that becomes evident. And that's as we work through adversity. If you want to really get to know someone, spend a day or two with them, or few days going through adversity together. That's a lot of what the military does to bring people together. Is they put you in artificial circumstances to go through adversity together, so that you, as the old saying goes, you sink or swim together. Well, when you do that, you really begin to find out about each other and grow together. And so God's given us the option in life of going through adversity to really learn and understand who we are through that adversity. And that's the value of it. And one of the keys there is, as we go through adversity, is to choose to be thankful in that adversity. And one of the key words in that whole phrase that I had someone share years ago is, we don't have to be thankful for the adversity, but we should be thankful in it. And it's different. Sometimes the adversity sucks. Sometimes it's bad news. And you're not likely going to be thankful for it. But if you learn to be thankful in it, you are then positioning yourself to learn from it and grow from it as a person and understand more who you are about. It's taken me a lot of years to begin to finally get to a point of having confidence in who I am, what I am, and not concerned with who others are, and not concerned with being who others think we should be. And that's where we are ultimately after. And so we just, it's to get off on my other area of priority. It's about seeking wisdom. And the first wisdom we need is about us. And once we can understand the wisdom about us, then we can begin to understand wisdom about others and how to live and relate to them. Let's see. Mary has a comment here. This was a very helpful presentation, and this will help all of us that listen to your presentation. It was stellar. I will take the assessment. One important question: how to handle a person in your immediate family, like a daughter-in-law, that is a true narcissist. And you either do it her way, or she holds the grandchildren away. She will not allow anyone to even try to talk to her. She is a controlling person who was an only child mom in California. In other words, her ideas are not very healthy.
It is difficult since she controls everything, since she has genius mind. Any suggestion for a person like this that is not healthy? Thank you for this very knowledgeable presentation.
Wow. Hard situations, I come back to one manner of character, and it's love. And like Anton said, the temptation to really blame narcissists and people like that, you know, save for the grace of God, there go I, to use an old saying. And by shifting our mind and understanding that we've been given grace and someone like that may not have received that grace yet. And so showing them love as much as possible is the way to go about it. And that's hard. And it's easy to say, hard to do, but demonstrating love to anyone in those cases is very, very important. Maybe we should do a talk sometime on what love is, Anton, because it's not this warm emotional feeling all the time.
Yeah, and I think word narcissist has come up a few times over the last few weeks. Maybe next week we do how to deal with narcissists, and maybe we incorporate that in there. But Mary, honestly, what I want you to think about is think about if you ever had to help a wounded dog. A dog that has got a wound or it's something that's hurting in their body, and they protect themselves. Even though you're trying to help them, even though you're trying to step in and fix the situation, they may bite you as soon as you get close to that area. And that's kind of what I'm seeing in this situation is this wounded dog whose ego may be hurt, whatever it may be. I don't know this necessarily the situation, but how can you establish trust? As hard as it is, very small steps, right? If I'm trying to work with that wounded dog, and I'm not trying to compare a person to a dog. I'm more trying to paint the picture. I first maybe have to give them a bite to eat, maybe a treat, maybe something else to just slowly gain their trust. Then I'm gonna come in. I'm gonna pet them. I'm gonna take care of them physically, create that contact. The point is, I haven't even touched the wound. I haven't went after the wound. I have to take steps just to build enough of a relationship to allow that dog to even begin to allow me to help that dog, right? So that's where I come back to think with empathy, no matter how hard it is, because the whole grandchildren thing is tough, right? All you want to do is be there and give them love, show them love, take care of them, and help with your life advice. So to prevent this person from making mistakes and doing things wrong, but you can't until they allow you to, right? So looking for ways, how can I build trust for this narcissist to allow me to help them? Because they need help, but they just don't know it, or they don't trust you enough to be the source of the help.
Address the person at their need first rather than what needs to be corrected. And it's hard because we want to help people learn what they need to learn, but sometimes there are obstacles that keep us all from learning. And fortunately, God's gracious enough to bring, we may need something else, big picture, but initially it comes with a cup of cold water. And so, wow, we are over time. Thanks, everyone. So next week, let's talk about narcissists. Let's see if we can dig down into how to address that, because it gets into also leadership, some other areas. It's a big factor in affecting things. So that will be topic for next week. Thanks, everybody. What a great discussion. You guys are the best. Anton and I are truly blessed with having a group of people like you that are here, set aside time to be with us. Thank you so very much for that. And God bless you each. Anton, any final closing comment?
Same. Thank you. Keep showing up. Keep spreading the message. We keep looking for people to be helping us spread the word, right? Spread the word about the show. Spread about the word about Human SOS mission. And hopefully just with a similar effort that me and Kevin put out, we can get to make greater impact because of all of your guys' help.
Thanks, everybody. God bless. Let's talk narcissism next week. Take care. See you on Tuesday.